I never thought I'd be sitting in a police station at 62 years old, watching my own family members point fingers at me like I was some kind of criminal. But there I was, hands folded in my lap, trying to keep my breathing steady while my cousin's husband paced back and forth telling the officers I'd stolen from him. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, that awful sterile sound that makes everything feel even more surreal than it already is. I could smell the burnt coffee from the break room down the hall. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone in that room could hear it, but I kept my face calm. I had to. Because I knew something they didn't know yet. I had proof. Not just any proof, but a signed confession sitting in my purse that would turn this whole nightmare upside down. Let me back up though, because none of this makes sense without understanding how we got here. My name is Margaret, but most people call me Maggie. I've lived in the same small town in Ohio my whole life, the kind of place where everybody knows everybody and secrets don't stay secret for very long. I raised 3 kids mostly on my own after my husband Paul passed away from cancer when I was 45. Those were hard years, the kind that age you faster than time should. But I got through them. I worked 2 jobs, kept food on the table, made sure my kids had what they needed. They all grew up and moved away, which hurt but also made me proud. That's what you want as a parent, right? For them to have lives bigger than the one you could give them. My cousin Linda and I grew up together. We were born 6 months apart and our mothers were sisters who lived next door to each other. We shared everything as kids. Clothes, secrets, dreams about the future. We promised we'd always be there for each other no matter what. And for a long time we were. When her first marriage fell apart, I let her stay with me for 3 months until she got back on her feet. When my Paul died, she was at my house every single day for weeks, bringing casseroles and sitting with me while I cried. That's the kind of bond we had. The kind you think can never break. She met Robert about 7 years ago at a church function. He was new to town, said he'd moved here for work. He was charming in that smooth way some men have, always knowing the right thing to say, always smiling. Linda fell hard and fast. Within 6 months they were married. I'll be honest, something about Robert bothered me from the start, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. He never did anything obviously wrong. He was polite to me, remembered my birthday, helped Linda around the house. But there was something in his eyes when he thought no one was looking. A kind of calculation. Like he was always thinking 3 steps ahead. Always measuring what he could get from every situation. Linda changed after she married him. Not all at once, but gradually, the way a photograph fades when it sits in the sun too long. She started canceling our weekly coffee dates. She stopped calling just to chat. When I'd see her at family gatherings, she seemed distracted, always checking her phone, always looking over at Robert like she needed his approval before she spoke. I tried to talk to her about it once, asked if everything was okay. She just smiled, that tight smile people wear when they're lying, and said everything was perfect. She said Robert was taking good care of her, that she'd never been happier. But her eyes told a different story. Robert worked in sales, or at least that's what he told everyone. He drove a nice car, always wore expensive suits, talked about big deals he was working on. But I noticed things didn't quite add up. The car was leased, I found out later. The suits came from outlet stores. The big deals never seemed to actually close. Linda went back to work after a year of marriage, said it was because she was bored at home, but I suspected they needed the money. She took a job at the hospital as an administrative assistant, long hours for not great pay, but she never complained. That wasn't like the Linda I knew. The old Linda would have said something, would have expected better. About 3 years into their marriage, Linda and Robert bought a house. Well, they bought half a house. It needed a lot of work, foundation issues, old plumbing, a roof that leaked when it rained hard. Linda called me all excited about it, said they got a great deal, said they were going to fix it up together. She asked if I could help them with the down payment. She needed $15,000. Now, I'm not a wealthy woman by any means, but I'd been careful over the years. I had some savings from Paul's life insurance and from selling our old house when I downsized to an apartment. I had about $40,000 put away for emergencies and for my old age. I should have said no. Looking back now, I can see that so clearly. But this was Linda. My cousin who was more like a sister. The girl I'd grown up with, the woman who'd held my hand at my husband's funeral. How could I say no? So I wrote them a check for $15,000. Linda cried when I gave it to her, hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. She promised she'd pay me back as soon as they could. Robert shook my hand and looked me right in the eye and said I was family, said they'd never forget this kindness. I believed him. They bought the house and moved in that summer. I helped them paint the bedroom, Spent a whole weekend up on a ladder with a roller while Robert was supposedly at work and Linda organized boxes. The house had good bones, you could see that. With some love and attention it could be really beautiful. Linda seemed happy those first few months. She planted flowers in the front yard, talked about what color to paint the kitchen, made plans for holiday dinners in their new dining room. I started to think maybe I'd been wrong about Robert. Maybe he really did love her. Maybe they really would be okay. Then the request started. Small at first. Robert called me one Tuesday evening, said their car had broken down and they needed $800 for repairs. Could I help them out just this once? They'd pay me back by the end of the month. I sent the money. End of the month came and went. No repayment, no mention of it. 2 months later Linda called crying. She said they were behind on the mortgage, just one payment, but the bank was threatening foreclosure. Could I loan them another $2,000? Just until Robert's big commission check came through. It was definitely coming, she said. He'd promised. I sent the money. The commission check never materialized. This pattern continued for the next year. Every few months there was an emergency. The furnace broke. Robert's car got totaled and insurance wouldn't cover it. Linda needed dental work. Medical bills. Property taxes. Each time I told myself this would be the last time. Each time I couldn't stand the thought of Linda losing her house, of her being out on the street. Each time I sent money. Sometimes $500, sometimes $3,000. I stopped keeping careful track, which was my first mistake. I just wanted to help my cousin. I just wanted her to be okay. By the end of that year I'd given them over $30,000 total. Almost all my savings. I started to feel anxious about money in a way I hadn't felt since Paul first got sick. I had maybe $8,000 left in my account. I was 61 years old with no retirement except Social Security. I started picking up extra shifts at the library where I worked part-time, reshelving books and helping with the computer lab. My back hurt and my feet ached, but I needed the money. I'd given away my security blanket and now I was feeling the cold. I finally worked up the courage to ask Linda about repayment. We were sitting in her kitchen on a Saturday afternoon. She'd invited me over for lunch and I thought maybe this was a good sign. Maybe she was ready to talk about the money. I brought it up gently, said I didn't want to be a burden, but I'd given them quite a bit over the past couple years and I was starting to need some of it back. Just to be secure. Just to have something in case of emergency. Linda's face changed. It was like watching a door slam shut. She got very quiet and very still. Then she said she didn't know what I was talking about. She said the only money I'd given them was the $15,000 for the down payment, and they were planning to pay that back eventually. I stared at her thinking I'd heard wrong. I said, what about the car repairs, the mortgage payment, the furnace, all those other times? She shook her head. He said those were gifts. She said I'd offered, she'd never asked. She said I couldn't give people gifts and then demand them back. That wasn't how family worked. I felt like I'd been slapped. I pulled out my phone and started showing her the bank transfers. Dates, amounts, notes I'd written to myself about what each payment was for. She looked at them with this blank expression and then she said I must be confused. She said maybe I should see a doctor about my memory. She actually said that. Suggested I might be getting dementia. I'm 62 years old and sharp as I've ever been, and my own cousin was gaslighting me in her kitchen over $30,000. I left that day feeling sick to my stomach. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to march right back in there and demand my money. Part of me wanted to call a lawyer. But this was family. You don't sue family. You don't drag family drama into court. That's what I'd been taught my whole life. Family takes care of family. Family forgives family. Family works things out privately. So I tried to let it go. I tried to convince myself that maybe the money didn't matter that much. Maybe keeping peace with Linda was worth more than $30,000. But I couldn't really let it go. Every time I looked at my bank balance I felt angry and hurt and foolish. I'd worked so hard for that money. I'd sacrificed so much. And I'd given it away to people who now acted like I was crazy for even mentioning it. I stopped going to family gatherings because I couldn't stand to be around Linda and Robert. I made excuses. Said I wasn't feeling well, said I had to work, said I had other plans. Linda didn't seem to notice or care that I was pulling away. She didn't call to check on me. Didn't ask if something was wrong. The silence between us grew and grew until it felt permanent. About 6 months ago things took a turn I never saw coming. I got a call from Linda's daughter Amy. Amy is 28 and lives about 2 hours away. She and I had always gotten along well. She called crying, said she needed to talk to me about something serious. Could she come visit? I said of course. She drove up the next day and sat in my living room looking terrified and guilty and sad all at once. Amy told me she'd discovered something. She'd been helping her mom and Robert with some paperwork, sorting through files in their home office, and she'd found a folder tucked away in the back of a drawer. Inside were documents. Loan applications in Linda's name that Linda had never signed. Credit cards Linda didn't know about. And a ledger. Robert kept a ledger. In his own handwriting, he'd documented every penny I'd sent them over the years. Dates, amounts, what he told me the money was for. And next to many of the entries he'd written notes. Things like check cleared, old lady didn't ask questions, she's good for more. Amy had taken pictures of everything with her phone. She showed them to me, her hands shaking as she scrolled through image after image. I felt like the room was spinning. There it all was in black and white. Proof that Robert had been systematically manipulating me, using Linda as the bait. Proof that every sob story had been carefully calculated. Proof that they'd planned this from the start, or at least Robert had. But the worst part, the part that made my stomach turn, was what Amy told me next. He said her mom knew. Linda knew what Robert was doing. Amy had confronted her, showed her the ledger, demanded to know how she could let this happen. And Linda had defended Robert. Said I had plenty of money, said I was old and wouldn't need it much longer anyway, said I should be happy to help family. She'd known all along. Every time she'd called crying, every time she'd hugged me and promised to pay me back, she'd known exactly what they were doing. She'd been in on it. I asked Amy why she was telling me this. She said because it wasn't right. She said she loved her mom but she couldn't watch this happen and stay silent. She said I deserved to know the truth. I asked her what she thought I should do. She said that was up to me, but if it was her, she'd want justice. She said there were other things in that folder too, things that suggested Robert was running the same scam on other people. An elderly neighbor. A woman from their church. He had a whole system. I spent the next few days in a fog. I didn't know what to feel. Betrayal, obviously. Bigger. But also this deep aching sadness. I'd lost my cousin. I'd lost someone I loved. And it turned out I'd never really known her at all. Or at least not the person she'd become. I thought about going to the police, but I wasn't sure if what they'd done was even illegal. Morally wrong, definitely. But illegal? Could you prosecute someone for accepting money from a family member who gave it willingly, even if they lied about why they needed it? I decided to confront them one more time. I called Linda and said I needed to talk to her and Robert together. I said it was important. She sighed like I was being dramatic but agreed. We met at their house on a Thursday evening. I brought copies of the photos Amy had taken. I brought my bank statements. I brought a notebook where I'd written down every single transaction with dates and explanations. I walked in ready for battle, ready to finally stand up for myself. Robert answered the door with his usual smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Linda was sitting on the couch looking tired. I didn't bother with small talk. I pulled out the photos and spread them on the coffee table. I said I knew what they'd been doing. I knew about the ledger. I knew it had all been lies. I wanted my money back and I wanted it now. Robert's smile never faltered. He picked up one of the photos, looked at it like he was studying a menu and then set it back down. He said he didn't know what I was talking about. He said that ledger was just his personal notes, nothing incriminating. He said I'd given them gifts and now I was trying to extort them. That's the word he used. Extort. He said if I kept pushing this, if I went to the police or tried to cause trouble, he'd report me for harassment. He'd tell everyone in our family that I'd gone senile and was making up crazy stories. He'd ruin my reputation. Linda just sat there. Didn't defend me, didn't defend him, just sat there looking at her hands. I asked her directly how she could do this to me. How she could throw away our whole relationship for money. She looked up then and her face was hard in a way I'd never seen before. She said I'd always had it easy. She said I'd had Paul and his good job and his life insurance. She said I'd never struggled the way she had. She said I owed her this. Those were her actual words. I owed her. I left their house shaking with rage and hurt. I sat in my car in their driveway for 10 minutes just trying to catch my breath. I couldn't believe what had just happened. I couldn't believe these were people I'd loved. I drove home and I cried for the first time in years. Not quiet tears but big, ugly, shoulder-shaking sobs. I cried for the money but more than that I cried for the loss. I cried for the cousin I'd thought I had and the family I'd thought I belonged to. The next week I went to see a lawyer. I explained the whole situation, showed her all my documentation. She listened carefully and then told me the hard truth. Yes, what they'd done was fraud. Yes, I could potentially press charges. But it would be difficult to prosecute. The money had been transferred willingly. I hadn't gotten anything in writing stating it was a loan. It would be my word against theirs. Even with the ledger, a good defense attorney could argue it was just Robert's personal notes and didn't prove intent to defraud. She said I could try to sue them in civil court, but that would cost money I didn't have and it could take years. She said the best revenge was probably just to walk away and cut them out of my life completely. I left her office feeling defeated. It seemed so unfair that they could just get away with it. That they could steal from me and lie to me and face no consequences. But what choice did I have? I couldn't afford a long court battle. I couldn't afford to let this consume the rest of my life. So I tried to let it go. I blocked Linda's number. I stopped responding to emails. I told the few family members who asked that Linda and I had grown apart and I needed space. Then about 8 weeks ago, everything exploded in a way I never expected. I got a call from a detective with the local police department. He said my name had come up in an investigation and he needed to ask me some questions. Could I come down to the station? My heart started pounding. I thought maybe Amy had gone to the police on my behalf. Maybe they were finally investigating Robert. I said yes, I could come down that afternoon. When I got to the station, the detective led me to a small interview room. The kind you see on TV shows, with a metal table and uncomfortable chairs and a mirror that's probably see-through from the other side. He offered me coffee, which I declined because my hands were already shaking. He sat down across from me and opened a folder. He said they'd received a report that I'd stolen money from Robert and Linda. Nearly $35,000 over a 3-year period. He said they were pressing charges. He said I needed to explain myself. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. They were accusing me. They'd stolen from me and now they were calling the police on me? I tried to explain, tried to tell the detective the truth, but I could hear how it sounded. I could hear the desperation in my own voice. It sounded like exactly what a guilty person would say. The detective listened with that neutral cop expression, writing notes occasionally, not showing whether he believed me or not. He said Robert and Linda had bank statements showing large deposits to their accounts from me. They claimed I'd had access to their banking information and had been transferring their money to myself. They said they'd only just discovered it when they were doing their taxes. They said they'd confronted me and I'd become aggressive and threatening. They had a recording, he said. A recording of me in their home making threats. That was from the night I'd confronted them with the ledger photos, of course. They'd recorded me without my knowledge and now they were using it against me. I pulled out my own bank statements. I showed him the transfers going from my account to theirs, not the other way around. I told him about Amy and the ledger. I told him I had proof of everything. The detective looked at my documents and then said he'd need to verify everything. He said I shouldn't leave town. He said they'd be in touch. I left the station feeling sick and scared in a way I'd never felt before. What if they actually arrested me? What if I ended up with a criminal record? I was 62 years old and I'd never even gotten a speeding ticket. I called Amy as soon as I got home. She was horrified. She said she couldn't believe her mother would go this far. She said she'd go to the police herself, she'd show them the photos of the ledger, she'd testify on my behalf. But I was scared. I didn't want to drag Amy into this mess. She'd already taken a huge risk showing me those documents. If Linda and Robert found out, it would destroy Amy's relationship with her mother. I told her to wait, told her I'd figure something out. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through every conversation, every interaction, trying to figure out how I'd ended up here. How had I let this happen? How had I been so stupid? I should have gotten everything in writing. I should have said no the first time they asked for more money. I should have seen through Robert from the beginning. I blamed myself for all of it. The next few weeks were torture. I kept waiting for a call from the detective. Kept expecting police to show up at my door. I couldn't eat, couldn't focus at work, couldn't think about anything else. I lost weight. I stopped sleeping more than a few hours a night. My boss at the library pulled me aside and asked if everything was okay. I lied and said I was fine, just dealing with some family issues. Which was technically true. Then I got a call from Linda. Not from a blocked number, from her actual phone. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Her voice was cold. She said they were moving forward with pressing charges. She said the detective had told them they had a strong case. She said if I didn't want to go to jail, I should sign over the deed to my apartment and whatever was left in my bank account to them. That would make them whole, she said. That would settle everything and they'd drop the charges. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They'd already taken $30,000 from me. Now they wanted the last few thousand I had left in my home? This wasn't about money anymore. This was about power. This was about Robert proving he could destroy me completely and get away with it. And Linda was right there beside him, helping him do it. I hung up on her. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped the phone. I sat on my kitchen floor and I realized I had to fight. I couldn't just let them win. Even if it meant dragging everything into the light, even if it meant hurting Amy, even if it meant spending money I didn't have on lawyers. I had to fight. That's when I remembered something Amy had said. She'd mentioned there were other victims. An elderly neighbor and a woman from church. What if I could find them? What if they had evidence too? What if together we could prove what Robert was doing? I started making calls. I reached out to people who attended the same church as Linda and Robert. I asked careful questions. Did anyone know of anyone who'd loaned them money? Had anyone else had problems with them? It took almost 2 weeks, but I finally found her. Her name was Dorothy and she was 74 years old. She lived 3 streets over from Linda and Robert. She'd loaned Robert $5,000 about a year ago. He'd told her he needed it for a business opportunity and he'd triple her investment. Of course, she never saw a penny back. When she'd asked for her money, Robert had told her she'd misunderstood, that it had been a gift, that she was too old to remember things clearly. The same playbook he'd used on me. Dorothy and I met at a coffee shop. She was small and thin with white hair and hands that trembled slightly when she held her cup. She told me her whole story and I told her mine. We compared notes. The lies were almost identical. The manipulation was the same. We weren't crazy. We weren't confused. We'd both been conned by the same man. Dorothy said she'd already filed a report with the police but nothing had come of it. They told her it was a civil matter, that she'd need to take him to small claims court. But she didn't have money for lawyers. She'd let it go, swallowed the loss, tried to move on. But now, knowing I was going through the same thing, knowing there might be others, she was ready to fight. We decided to write everything down. Every detail. Every lie. Every manipulation. We created a timeline showing the pattern. Dorothy remembered that Robert had shown her documents about his business opportunity. Slick pamphlets with profit projections and testimonials. She'd thrown them away after she realized it was a scam, but she remembered the name of the company. I did some research and found out it didn't exist. The website was fake. The testimonials were stock photos. Robert had created the whole thing just to scam her. With this new information, I called the detective again. I asked for a meeting. I brought Dorothy with me. We sat down in that same interview room and we laid everything out. We showed him the pattern. We showed him proof that Robert had done this before. We showed him that the accusations against me didn't make sense given my bank records. The detective listened. Really listened this time. He said he'd look into it further. He said he'd been having doubts about Linda and Robert's story anyway. Some things didn't add up. That meeting was 3 weeks ago. I left feeling a tiny bit hopeful for the first time in months. But I also knew this wasn't over. I knew Robert and Linda weren't going to just give up. I knew they'd fight back. Sure enough, a few days after that meeting, I got served with papers. Linda and Robert were suing me in civil court. They were claiming I'd slandered them by telling people they'd stolen from me. They were seeking damages of $50,000. They were trying to bury me. Trying to scare me into silence. I called the lawyer I'd consulted before. He said this was actually good news. A civil case meant discovery. It meant we could subpoena documents. It meant we could put Robert and Linda under oath and make them answer questions. It meant Amy could testify and bring those photos of the ledger. It meant we could find out if there were other victims and bring them forward. She said it would be hard and expensive, but if I was willing to fight, we might actually win. I said yes. I said I'd fight. I'd spent my whole life avoiding conflict, keeping peace, putting other people first. But not this time. This time I was going to stand up for myself even if it cost me everything I had left. The lawyer got to work. She filed a counterclaim against Robert and Linda for fraud and emotional distress. She subpoenaed their bank records and financial documents. She contacted Amy and asked her to be a witness. Amy agreed immediately. She was done protecting her mother. She was ready to tell the truth. Then something happened that changed everything. The detective called me last Monday. He said he needed me to come back to the station. There'd been a development. I went down there expecting the worst. Expecting him to say they were moving forward with charges against me. Instead, he led me to that same interview room. And sitting there looking smaller and older than I'd ever seen him was Robert. No Linda, just Robert. And sitting next to Robert was a lawyer. The detective sat down and explained that Robert had something he wanted to say to me. Robert's lawyer slid a document across the table. It was typed on legal letterhead, notarized, signed by Robert. It was a confession. A full confession. He admitted to systematically defrauding me of $32,000 over a 3-year period. He admitted to creating false emergencies to solicit money. He admitted to keeping the ledger. He admitted to manipulating Linda into helping him. He admitted to recording me without my knowledge and using that recording to file false charges. He admitted to doing the same thing to Dorothy and to at least 2 other people in town. I stared at the document, reading it over and over, not quite believing what I was seeing. Asked why. Why was he confessing? The detective explained that they'd executed a search warrant on Robert's home and computer. They'd found evidence of a much larger fraud scheme. Robert had been running online scams, identity theft, credit card fraud. The FBI was involved now. The charges he was facing went way beyond what he'd done to me. His lawyer had advised him to cooperate, to confess to everything in hopes of getting a plea deal. Robert sat there not looking at me, jaw clenched, hands flat on the table. This wasn't remorse. This was a cornered animal trying to minimize damage. He didn't care that he'd hurt me. He didn't care that he'd destroyed my relationship with Linda. He was just trying to save himself. The detective said that with this confession, all charges against me would be dropped immediately. He said I could use the confession in my civil case. He said the district attorney would be pressing criminal charges against Robert and likely against Linda too as an accessory. He said I might even get some of my money back eventually, though he couldn't promise that. Robert's assets would be seized, but there were other victims and creditors in line ahead of me. I didn't know what to say. I just nodded. The detective asked if I wanted to make a statement. I looked at Robert. Really looked at him. I thought about everything he'd put me through. The stress, the fear, the sleepless nights. The betrayal. The loss of my cousin. Part of me wanted to scream at him. Part of me wanted him to suffer the way he'd made me suffer. But mostly I just felt tired. And sad. I said no, I didn't need to make a statement. I said I just wanted it to be over. The detective nodded like he understood. He had Robert and his lawyer leave first. Then he walked me out through a different door. He said he was sorry for how long this had taken. He said he'd had doubts about their story from the beginning, but he'd had to follow procedure. He said he hoped I could move on now. I left the station and sat in my car in the parking lot for a long time. I had the confession in a folder on the passenger seat. Physical proof that I'd been telling the truth all along. Physical proof that I wasn't crazy or confused or senile. Physical proof that I'd been the victim, not the perpetrator. I called my lawyer and told her everything. She was thrilled. She said this changed everything about the civil case. She said Linda and Robert's lawsuit against me would be dismissed. She said we could move forward with my counterclaim. She said I'd almost certainly win. Then I called Amy. She cried when I told her. She said she was so relieved. She said she'd been so scared that her mom and Robert were going to get away with it. She asked what was going to happen to Linda. I said I didn't know. Probably criminal charges. Probably jail time. Amy was quiet for a long time. Then she said her mom had made her choices. She said Linda had chosen Robert over family, over truth, over basic human decency. She said she couldn't protect her anymore. That was 5 days ago. Since then things have moved fast. Linda called me yesterday. She was crying. Really crying, not the fake tears she'd used to manipulate me before. He said she was sorry. She said she'd been wrong. She said Robert had convinced her I wouldn't really miss the money, that I'd practically offered it, that it wasn't really stealing. She said she knew that sounded crazy now, but at the time she'd believed him. She said she loved me and she needed me to forgive her. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to forgive her. That's the person I've always been. The peacemaker. The one who smooths things over. The one who puts relationships first. But I couldn't. Not this time. What she'd done wasn't just about the money. She'd been willing to let me go to jail. She'd been willing to let me lose everything. She'd looked me in the eye and called me crazy, told me I was losing my memory, made me doubt my own reality. That's not something you can just apologize away. I told her I needed time. I told her I couldn't talk to her right now. I told her we'd see what happened with the criminal case and the civil case and then maybe someday we could talk again. But I couldn't promise forgiveness. She cried harder and said she understood. Then she hung up. I don't know if I'll ever forgive Linda. I don't know if I should. I know that's what family is supposed to do, forgive and move on. But there are some betrayals that are too deep. Some wounds that don't heal. Maybe that makes me a bad person. Maybe that makes me unforgiving and cold. But I can't help how I feel. The civil case is still pending. My lawyer says it'll probably settle out of court. Even if Robert goes to jail, Linda will still have assets. The house they bought with my down payment, her salary, her retirement accounts. Will probably get a judgment against her. Whether I'll ever actually see that money is another question. But at least there will be a record. At least the truth will be on paper. As for the criminal case, Robert is looking at serious jail time. Multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, filing false reports. The prosecutor said he might take a plea deal, but even with that he's looking at years behind bars. Linda's charges are less serious since she was mostly just helping him and not running her own scams, but she'll still probably face some consequences. Fines at minimum, maybe probation, possibly some jail time. Me? I'm trying to rebuild. I'm trying to figure out who I am after all of this. I'm 62 years old and I feel like I'm starting over. I don't have my savings. I don't have my cousin. I don't have the family I thought I had. But I have the truth. I have my dignity. I have the knowledge that I stood up for myself when it mattered. I've been going to therapy. My lawyer recommended it and I was skeptical at first, but it's actually helping. I talk about the betrayal, about the anger, about the grief. Because I am grieving. I'm grieving the loss of Linda, of the relationship we had, of the person I thought she was. My therapist says that's normal. She says betrayal by family is one of the deepest wounds a person can experience. She says it's okay to feel angry. It's okay to not forgive. It's okay to put myself first. I've also been reconnecting with my kids. They live far away and we don't talk as often as we should, but I called them after all this happened and told them everything. They were shocked and angry on my behalf. My daughter wanted to fly out immediately and confront Linda herself. My sons wanted to help me pay for lawyers. I told them no, I could handle it, but it felt good to know they had my back. It felt good to be reminded that not all family is toxic. Some family actually loves you and wants what's best for you. Dorothy and I have become friends. We have coffee every week and we talk about everything and nothing. She's a good person, kind and funny and wise in the way that people who've lived a long life can be. She's been through this too, so she understands in a way other people can't. We joke sometimes about starting a support group for people who've been conned by Robert. We could probably fill a room. I've also started volunteering at a senior center, helping elderly people with their finances and teaching them how to spot scams. Feels good to take something horrible and turn it into something useful. Feels good to help other people avoid what happened to me. I tell them stories, not my story but similar ones. I teach them the warning signs. The pressure to act quickly. The appeals to family loyalty. The sob stories. The promises to pay back soon. I tell them it's okay to say no. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to demand things in writing. I wish someone had taught me those things. Looking back now, I can see all the red flags I missed. The way Robert was too charming. The way Linda changed after she married him. The way the emergencies were always urgent but never quite verifiable. The way they got defensive when I asked about repayment. The way they tried to make me feel guilty for even bringing it up. If I'd been stronger, if I'd trusted my instincts, if I'd been willing to set boundaries, maybe none of this would have happened. But I can't change the past. I can only learn from it and move forward. And that's what I'm trying to do. Some days are harder than others. Some days I wake up angry all over again. Some days I miss Linda so much it physically hurts. Some days I lie awake at night replaying conversations, thinking of what I should have said, what I should have done differently. But mostly I'm okay. I'm surviving. I'm learning to trust myself again. I'm learning that setting boundaries isn't mean it's necessary. I'm learning that family doesn't mean letting people hurt you. I'm learning that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is walk away. I think about what I'd tell my younger self if I could go back. I'd tell her to be braver. I'd tell her that kindness and boundaries can coexist. I'd tell her that people who truly love you won't manipulate you or make you feel crazy or threaten you when you stand up for yourself. I'd tell her that some people are broken in ways you can't fix and it's not your job to try. I'd tell her that losing a relationship with someone who treats you badly isn't actually a loss, it's freedom. I wish I'd known those things 30 years ago or even 5 years ago. But I know them now. And maybe that's enough. Maybe at 62 I'm finally learning the lessons I should have learned a long time ago. Better late than never, right? The apartment is quiet tonight. I made myself dinner, just a simple pasta with vegetables, and I ate it slowly while watching the sun set through my kitchen window. The light was golden and soft and it made everything look almost beautiful. After dinner I sat down with a cup of tea and I thought about everything that's happened. And I realized something. I'm not the same person I was when this started. That person would have given up. That person would have let them win. That person would have signed over her apartment and her bank account just to avoid conflict. But this person, the one I am now, fought back. This person stood her ground. This person demanded justice even when it was hard and scary and expensive. I'm proud of that person. I'm proud of me. Maybe that sounds arrogant, but I don't care. I survived something that could have destroyed me. I came out the other side damaged but intact. I lost money and family and sleep and peace of mind. But I didn't lose myself. I didn't lose my integrity. I didn't lose my ability to know right from wrong. And that signed confession sitting in my safe deposit box? That's not just proof of Robert's crimes. It's proof that the truth matters. It's proof that persistence matters. It's proof that even when everything seems stacked against you, even when the people who should love you turn on you, even when you feel small and powerless and alone, you can still fight. And sometimes if you're lucky and you don't give up, you can even win. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if I'll ever get my money back. I don't know if Linda will go to jail or just get probation. I don't know if Amy and I will stay close or if this whole thing will be too painful and our relationship will fade. I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust family the same way again. But I know I'll be okay. I know I'm stronger than I thought I was. I know I can survive hard things. I know I can stand alone if I have to. And I know that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you will let you down in ways you never imagined possible. That's not your fault. That's not your failure. That's their brokenness, not yours. So if there's anything I'd want someone to learn from my story, it's this. Don't let people take advantage of your kindness. Don't confuse love with enabling. Don't set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. And if someone betrays you, if someone lies to you and steals from you and then tries to make you think you're crazy, don't accept it. Don't excuse it. Don't forgive it just because that's what you're supposed to do. Stand up. Speak up. Fight back. Even if your voice shakes. Even if you're scared. Even if everyone tells you to let it go and keep the peace. Some things are worth fighting for. Your dignity is one of them. Your truth is one of them. Your right to be treated with basic human decency is one of them. I'm 62 years old and I'm starting over with almost nothing. But I have my truth. I have my dignity. I have the knowledge that when it mattered most, I didn't back down. And you know what? That's worth more than $32,000. That's worth more than a relationship with someone who could betray me so completely. That's worth everything. So I'm okay. I'm more than okay. I'm free. Free from the manipulation. Free from the gaslighting. Free from the constant worry about whether I was crazy or if I really had a right to be upset. I know the truth now. I have proof of the truth now. And that truth set me free. If you're reading this, if you're in a situation where someone is taking advantage of you, where someone is lying to you, where someone is making you doubt yourself, please hear me. You're not crazy. You're not making it up. You're not being too sensitive or too demanding. Something feels wrong, it probably is wrong. Trust yourself. Stand up for yourself. And if you need to walk away from people who hurt you, even if they're family, that's okay. You don't owe anyone access to your life if they're only going to use it to harm you. I look at that confession sometimes, that signed piece of paper that changed everything. And I think about how close I came to giving up. How close I came to believing them when they said I was confused. How close I came to just accepting the loss and moving on because fighting seemed too hard. I'm so glad I didn't give up. I'm so glad I kept pushing. I'm so glad I found Dorothy and Amy and the detective who actually listened. But mostly I'm glad I found myself again. The self I'd lost somewhere along the way while trying to be nice and accommodating and family-oriented. The self that knows her own worth. The self that won't be pushed around or manipulated or gaslit. The self that can look in the mirror and feel proud instead of ashamed. That's the real victory here. Not the confession, though that helps. Not the criminal charges, though that feels like justice. The real victory is that I got myself back. And nobody, not Robert, not Linda, not anyone can ever take that away from me again. So yes, they tried to have me arrested for theft. They tried to take everything from me. They tried to destroy me. But in the end, all they did was show me how strong I really am. And for that, in a twisted way, I'm almost grateful. Because now I know. Now I really know. I can survive anything. And I can do it with my head held high. That's my story. That's my truth. And I'm not ashamed of any of it anymore. I was taken advantage of by people I loved and trusted. That's not my shame to carry. That's theirs. All I did was love my family and try to help when they said they needed it. There's no shame in that. The shame belongs entirely to the people who exploited that love for their own gain. And if telling my story helps even one person recognize the signs of financial abuse or family manipulation, if it helps even one person find the courage to stand up for themselves, then maybe all of this happened for a reason. Maybe my pain can prevent someone else's. Maybe my story can be a warning and a lesson and a source of strength for someone who needs it. Because that's what I needed when I was in the thick of it. I needed to know I wasn't alone. I needed to know other people had been through this and survived. I needed to know it was okay to be angry and hurt and unwilling to forgive. I needed permission to put myself first. So I'm giving you that permission now, whoever you are reading this. Put yourself first. Protect yourself. Don't sacrifice your well-being and security for people who don't appreciate it. Don't light yourself on fire to keep ungrateful people warm. You deserve better. You deserve people who would never dream of hurting you the way I was hurt. And if you've already been hurt like this, if you're in the middle of your own nightmare with manipulative family or friends, please know it's not your fault. You're not stupid. You're not weak. You're human. You trusted people you loved. That's normal and healthy. What's not normal or healthy is what they did with that trust. That's on them, not you. Fight if you can. Get help. Document everything. Find allies. Don't face it alone. And if you can't fight, if it's too much or too dangerous or too expensive, then walk away with your head high. Surviving is enough. Getting out is enough. You don't have to win. You just have to protect yourself and move forward. I'm moving forward now. Some days it's 1 step forward and 2 steps back. But I'm moving. I'm healing. I'm rebuilding. And I'm doing it on my own terms with my truth intact and my dignity restored. That signed confession they tried to use against me? It's now the thing that proved my innocence and their guilt. Life has a funny way of turning things around sometimes. What was meant to destroy me ended up saving me. And I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that truth, real truth, has power. And persistence in pursuit of that truth can move mountains. So thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for hearing me. Thank you for letting me share what happened and what I learned. I hope you never need these lessons. But if you do, I hope my experience helps you find your own strength and your own path forward. We're all just trying to get through this life with our dignity and decency intact. Sometimes people make that harder than it should be. But we keep going anyway. We keep fighting for what's right anyway. We keep believing in truth and justice anyway. Because the alternative is giving up and letting the manipulators and liars win. And I refuse to let them win. Not anymore. Not ever again.